But now some time for some optimism. We'll look at some inspiring and promising new tech and business models that are being developed today. We'll focus on materials, what things are made from and what they're made of. We'll focus on retail, like how products are sold, how they're consumed, and then manufacturing, how products come to exist in the first place. So for material innovations, the first part that we'll talk about, the industry is thinking about and developing new materials for a number of reasons. Over 60% of the clothing that we produce today is made of polyester, which we all know is derived from oil, a non-renewable resource, so we can only do it for so long. We need better and simply other raw materials for our products. Another reason is that we know synthetics we use in our clothing contribute to the microplastics we're finding that are polluting the ocean, and they don't biodegrade, they don't break down. The Biomimicry Institute often uses the phrase that loops leak, and this reminds us that we should really use materials that, presuming that they're going to leak into the environment, won't damage the environment at all. So we have to think about what we're making our products out of. And then less than 1% of the clothing that we attempt to recycle today is actually recycled. We need to make products out of materials that can actually be reused and remade into other things or composted and biodegraded. So there are overall problems in raw material resources, resource heavy and polluting processing, microplastic pollution, and then this huge problem that all goods eventually become waste right now in the fashion industry. A lot of reasons to go after new materials. So what do I mean when I say that all goods eventually become waste? Is that recycling is the same quality because you're ripping it up. And it's always going to be shorter lengths. And then when you twist it back into fibers again, because they're shorter, they're also going to stick out of the yarn more. And so they're going to be scratchier. So it's really hard to imagine this going on forever. And you can only divide something so many times before it's not usable again. If you rip up a piece of paper in half and you rip it in half again, it's at some point you can't even see it. So that's sort of the same thing that happens when you mechanically recycle fibers. So the way that we get around this problem today is that we blend the recycled material with virgin material. And that's not a true solution. It's a really good direction to go in, but it's not a true solution. So that's what we have with natural fibers. When we look at synthetic fibers, we have the same problem with recycling really being downcycling. So synthetic fibers are polyester, nylon, acrylic. There are a bunch of them out there. They're best thermally recycled, which means they're like melted down into their liquid polymer and then re-extruded into fibers again. As with recycling any plastics, polymer chains are shortened and therefore weakened every time they're melted down and re-extruded. So it can only be recycled reasonably a few times to get there. Here's a chart kind of showing what happens to a PET plastic bottle in order to become a polyester shirt. So the main steps are that the bottle here gets shredded into smaller plastic flakes, and then these flakes are heated up to their melt point, and the molten PET is reformed into these little pellets here. Those are the best form the form that they want in order to be extruded into yarn and then made into cloth and then finally fabric again. The extrusion process is very much like, when you're playing with Play-Doh at home and you put it through the holes, it comes out like spaghetti. It's honestly the same exact process here. It's just a lot more pressure and heat involved in this case. This kind of process is not indefinite. It happens a few times and then it's not reusable again. And then, so we looked at natural fibers. These are synthetic fibers, blended garments. So you can blend at different stages. You can blend at the fiber stage, the yarn stage, the fabric stage. These are the most challenging because the various components need to then be separated before they're recycled. We wear garments made of blended material all the time. I'm sure we're all wearing them right now because it allows for very precisely engineering particular properties into the garments and especially helps to control costs. One example that we see all the time is cotton poly. Any t-shirt that you have, if it's a really nice t-shirt, it's going to be made of just cotton, but mostly it's going to be cotton poly because you want to keep that really nice hand of the cotton. It has that nice feel to it, but you want to lower the cost. So then you mix it to that optimal point with the polyester to reduce cost. So separating those components is really tricky. A few groups have figured it out at kind of the lab stage, but they're in the process of scaling up to the industry. And once they get there, they're going to still run into those problems that we talked about before with at the natural fiber stage and the synthetic stage, even if they're just a homogeneous material. So super big problems with recycling. There are some exciting solutions out there. So one here is Infinited. They believe they've found a solution for some of the recycling problems that we just looked at. They make cellulose carbamate. They make that from cellulosic materials. So they claim that, you could even put cardboard in, and because that's cellulose and get out this material, but, cotton, rayon, linen, paper, you can put into their black box machine. My first hesitations when I heard about this technology was that cellulose carbamate is extremely similar to rayon. And to make rayon, you require either sulfuric acid or carbon disulfate in order to polymerize that cellulose into viscose. And there's no talk also of what happened to the cellulose carbamate when it was done. So those are a couple of hesitations I had, but digging in a little more, I see that they're able to use urea instead of a toxic material to get to that point, which is very exciting. And since they say they use cellulosic materials as their inputs, it's possible, in theory, not in practice, but in theory, that they could go over and over again because their material output is a cellulosic material. But like we talked about earlier, it's very likely that those those polymer chains are shortened with each cycle. So I'm very curious to see how this goes for them. They just launched their first collaboration recently, and we hope that we can work with them in the future. VEGEA is similarly trying to make materials from cellulose-based waste. Just like with Infinited's Infinifiber that we just looked at, the molecular structures of the original cellulose need to change so drastically, and the process involves enough chemical treatments that it's kind of unlikely the material will be recycled in a reasonable way after. But I've seen this material and worked with it. It's very beautiful. It's made with much better raw materials than standard leather, and it goes super well with the Italian story because this is made from leftover grapes from their wine process. PINATEX is another plant-based leather alternative. It's made from pineapple leaf cellulose fibers, also PLA, polylactic acid, and petroleum-based resin. It's not a perfect combination. When you look at those things all together, it's like, wait, those don't match up. But it's really a start to getting away from animal-based leather. Standard alternative today to animal-based leather is PVC, polyvinyl chloride. It's in the synthetic world, I think it's after polyester or polyethylene and polypropylene, I think, are more prevalent, and then PVC. So there's just so much of it that it's very cheap, and that's why it's replaced leather. So to make this new material, PINATEX, the fibers from pineapple leaves are extracted, they're washed and dried. This pineapple, this PALF, I think they call it, pineapple leaf fiber is mixed with corn-based PLA and extruded into a kind of a non-woven mesh, which if they just stop there, that's great because that's biodegradable, and then they can claim somewhat of sustainability. But what really gets me is that then they need to finish it, because what they had created there is not good enough for the market. It's going to be absorbent, probably. It's not going to act like the material that they want. So what they do is they then apply resin and a polyurethane coating to it, which makes it then desirable consumer, but then goes from biodegradable to just impossible to do anything with. You can't separate it into components at that point. So to me, this is more a story of where the origin of the materials, which I think is great that they're thinking about that, but there's no thought as to what it's going to be at the end of the day. And I think its widespread adoption, to me, is a signal that brands and consumers are at this point in it for a story more than anything else. But it is a good step in the right direction. VITROLABS also wants to fix the leather industry, but they're not doing it with plant-based materials. Instead, they're doing it with bio-based materials. This is lab-grown leather. They grow leather starting from animal cells placed in a cultivator along with some nutrients, which is super cool. And they say the results are identical to animal-based leather without the water use and land use. And then, of course, the animal use, because they're just starting with the cells. So excited to see where they go as well. Moving away from leather, but instead to dyeing. Hue is a startup trying to disrupt dyeing processes in the fashion industry, and they're also taking a bioengineering approach to it. They create microbes that consume sugar to produce dye enzymatically. Their first color that they're tackling is indigo because of its denim jeans ubiquity, like the same thing, reason why we're going after jeans at Unspun as well. It's something that really needs to change. And another company to watch here is Algaeing. I actually don't know how to say their name because they just rebranded yesterday, but they used to be known as Alga Life, and they've also taken on this same challenge. All right, so moving from leather to dye to now down. We don't really think about down, but yeah, not many people can consider replacing down feathers in their jackets for something more humane. But sourcing feathers is really tricky because it's for a while, up until 10 years ago, it was that you would just pull feathers out of live animals, and it was just an awful thing. They've started to regulate more, but it's still very tricky. So a lot of companies, or a few companies at least, are, if they're not going the synthetic route, which has its own problems, they're starting to think about other materials. This one, I don't know whether to laugh or I don't know. I love it, but this company PANGAIA is getting creative with their raw material input. So they are using dried petals instead of feathers to trap heat. I haven't done any tests with it. I don't know how insulative it is, but like feathers are just the optimal for heat because they have these beautiful fractal patterns that really just hold a ton of air, and they've evolved for, I don't even, millions of years, so long, to the point where they really insulate the best. So I think they'd be really difficult to replicate, but I think it's really creative what they're trying to do here. And there's a really interesting story in the materials, just like inherent beauty of them and presumed biodegradability. So very excited to see what else replaces feathers and down in the near future. Okay, previously we talked about blended materials being difficult to recycle in themselves, but it's also true of garments. Even the fact that garments have all sorts of pieces, fabric pieces, notions, zippers, buttons, etc., that makes them hard to disassemble for recycling. So this company, RESORTECS, has developed a thread that they say dissolves. I mean, really, it melts at a lower temperature than the rest of the materials around it, so that when you're done with something, they put it in their industrial machine, which then will melt those seams away, and then you can reuse the rest of the materials there. So it should get us to something that's more recyclable, but it's still leaving out a lot of the big problems in recyclability. But I think it's exciting that they're trying to make it more realistic that we can recycle something. And then last in the section on materials, this is another company thinking about the longevity and the full life of a garment. They're called PETIT. And as you can see, they've built a lot of little pleats into their thermoformed garments that enable the garment to like grow along with little kiddos. And we can additionally kind of, if you think about garments, change how we treat and design with the materials that we have to make a difference. So it's not only about the actual material, but also how we design with it. So I'm excited to see that they're trying that. Okay, the way that we design makes a difference. The way that we sell product and interact with the consumer also makes a difference. With so much moving online and how physical and materialistic the industry inherently is, there's some very immediate challenges and longer term opportunities here in retail tech. Online returns are the most pressing issue with e-commerce for the industry right now. Chances are everyone here has shopped online before. I don't know, maybe even shopped online today. So you probably know firsthand, it's not, that one of the biggest challenges is like being able to try on what you're about to buy. Fashion e-com rates are over 30% for that reason. So someone buys something, it's a 1/3 chance they're going to return it. That's 3 times as bad as it is in store for these exact reasons. Okay, so what happens to those 1/3 of things that get returned? In this chart here, you can see that 1/3 of those are put back on the metaphorical shelf after they're fixed up a little bit. Their packages are replaced, or they're made to look a little better. So that part is good. But then 1/4 are sent straight to landfill because it's just cheaper than trying to resell them. And then 1/5 are set to outlets or next tier channels. So that kind of goes down the line, might not get sold there, but that's at least the next step. And then the last 1/5 or so are downcycled into things like wall insulation or rags. And that, of course, eventually, what do you go after a rag? You go down to the landfill. So that's just like a placeholder to the next step of getting to landfill. So a lot of things going to landfill. This is a chart showing what execs are thinking about right now. So it's really no surprise that top of mind for them is COVID. COVID is arguably the biggest challenge to the whole world right now. But the surprising thing to me has been how quickly the industry has adapted with digital. Entire companies and their supply chains in a very historically analog industry needed to move online in just a matter of months. So I've been very impressed and pleasantly surprised by that. So with so much of our shopping moving online, it's really no wonder that new models would spring up to meet the challenges and opportunities that e-com brings. Box subscriptions have increased with online purchasing, since arguably the biggest barrier to online shopping is being able to try on a product. So why not just try it on at home? With a box subscription, you're sent a bunch of product and just send back whatever you don't want. This is definitely old hat by now, but still only a share of the market, like a few % of the market is covered by this. And then consumption and outfit quantities have increased in recent years as well, mostly because of the globalization that we've looked at recently, but also because of social media's pressure to be fresh and always be wearing something new. And this has really encouraged business models with easy turnover, get the quantities that you need without the guilt of accumulated clothing. So rental and subscription models are prime examples of this. And then the resale market also supports our natural desire to replenish. If you buy something, you're like, oh, I can just go resell it later on. After trends like Marie Kondo and kind of COVID lockdown forcing us to confront what we have, I'm not surprised to see capsule wardrobes and apps like Wearing get developed to try to help people organize and simplify their closet. I have yet to see or meet anyone who uses one of these things, or maybe it's just meeting and finding someone who admits to using one of these. I don't know if anyone does. I would love to talk with you after. There's just a lot of friction to having to photograph your whole wardrobe. I think a tension point is that for someone that really needs this is like, they have so much stuff that it's too overwhelming to think about trying to photograph it. But then for people who don't have a lot of stuff, this would be quite easy to adopt, but they don't really need it. So kind of an interesting point there where, yeah, maybe the people who need it aren't going to be able to get it. I don't think this is alone going to catch on with people, like digitizing their wardrobes and being able to see it through an app. But with product online, like overall digitizing, all the new product being digitized, and people digitizing themselves into avatars to eventually try things on, I think we'll kind of naturally move in a more seamless, like digital to physical interface, so that, you know, consumers, when they're buying a new thing online that they're seeing, they can then try it on with old product that they already have, so they can at least see how it works together. So I think maybe slowly we'll get there, but not full wardrobes. And then looking at digitization, not all three of these models are actually models, or at least not in a model in the way that we normally describe a model. Normally, we'd expect models to be people you hire to get ready and put on physical clothing for like a photo shoot or a runway show. But instead, these people are, I don't want to call them, they're virtual models, they're not people. They and the clothing they're wearing don't exist in the real world. So Lil Michaela, pictured here on the left in the middle, she made about $9 million as an influencer last year, just from paid placement ads on her Instagram feed, $9 million. And it's gonna get higher, but she was the highest paid last year. With virtual models, the industry can expedite the diversity representation that it has needed for a long time and really came to the forefront last year. But a huge downside to that is that there's a lot of risk in the money that goes to them not being evenly distributed. So I think that's something, as we adopt this more, that we watch out for. Then many brands are starting to lean into diversity as well, knowing there's an untapped market, that many customers expect inclusion, and simply that it's where the industry needs to go. But being both aspirational and inclusive is really, really hard to find. If society didn't hold the stereotypes it does and set unwritten standards, brands wouldn't be pressured to show that skinny, white, tall model that they often do. If we support the ones who are more inclusive, the industry will naturally move that way. So it's really honestly as simple as that, but it's going to take a big force to move that way. And a lot of these more quote unquote diverse brands are still struggling, especially the plus ones. Universal Standard here is a brand that noticed that 3/4 of women in the US they wear over a size 14. And they don't have access to the same product that other sizes do. So they created what some would call a plus size brand, but with stronger messaging around product for everyone over product for plus. And I think that's one reason why they've been able to cut through the noise or like reach people, because there's such a negative connotation with the word plus in the market. And then there are other brands who aren't focusing on people inclusivity, but instead product inclusivity and figuring out how to and reconstruct unwanted clothing into funky kind of street style clothing. FRANKIE Collective here does just that. And they have a following of people who want a new take on old designs and old product. And especially, as you can see here, especially something edgy. This is not even close to being as edgy as they get, but it's, it kind of hints at it. As far as sustainability goes, this is not a solution, but it's a great way to divert product from immediate landfill, from going somewhere else. Redone has the same mission. They take old product, mostly jeans, and reimagine the product. Often they're taking vintage jeans, cutting them up, stitching them back together in a slightly more pronounced shape. Surprisingly, they can command more money from the redone product than the original pair, because they're really selective and choosy about what they pick for jeans and how they reconstruct it. So those are some examples of retail tech that are out there today. Beyond that, and materials, we need to look at new ways of making clothing. So this is something we've talked about already, but it's clear that the fashion industry is broken with how much excess it makes, how its products are really worthless at the end of their linear life, how poorly people who make the products are treated, how convoluted and wasteful the supply chain is, which is really optimizing for cost, and how many of the products we buy we don't even like. We jump to a lot of conclusions as we create our products, like that's how the industry is kind of set up. We build them before anyone wants them. This brand here, MISHA NONOO, is a fashion label making on demand. They want to fix the issue of excess inventory. If you can unlock the production process, it makes so much sense from a business standpoint to make on demand, because it's a positive cash flow model. Someone gives you the money, you take it, you build something with it. The label says, when you place an order with us, you aren't getting an item that's been sitting around polybagged in a warehouse for months. You're getting something made for you in a vetted, ethical factory, one garment at a time. So it's just much more special. It's uncommon to make clothing on demand in the fashion industry today, but there's definitely growing interest. McKinsey in its State of Fashion report predicts that it'll actually be mainstream by 2025, reducing overstock and just being more agile with what you can make. The typical 30% unsold goods that were actually way higher last year because of COVID, that will not be a problem anymore. And last year, brands were out millions, hundreds of millions of dollars because of what they weren't able to sell because of what happened unexpectedly to us with COVID last year. Another thing that MISHA NONOO says is that waste is just baked into the system, that financial waste and environmental waste are just considered the cost of doing business. It's just an assumed that that's just the way it goes. This is another brand that's doing something similar with made to order, and they make custom fit t-shirts. They ask you 4 questions to determine your fit. The company, actually just after a few years, they hit profitability, which I think is a real testament to made to order models. This is Anomalie, and they wanted to bring made to order wedding dresses to everyone. So they've been developing software that allows brides to design their own dress and have it made at a reasonable price. This is really digital, bringing so much possibility to the industry where everyone can get exactly what they want. Another company, this is called UNMADE. They're working towards a similar idea to allow customers to design what they want, but they've taken a B2B approach on it, launching products with brands directly. They've worked with Rafa, New Balance, Ralph Lauren, bringing their customers custom design. And then there are groups like ONPOINT Manufacturing. They're on the other side of things with the manufacturing, but they're working out how to batch and more efficiently produce for companies like the ones we just saw, Son of a Tailor, Anomalie, UNMADE, MISHA NONOO. And their MOQ, their minimum order quantity, is 1, which is really exciting to see that you can just deliver them a tech pack and some materials and say, make this one thing for me, and they won't turn you away, which is crazy in the industry where normally you're looking at least a few thousand. Like that would be very, very low as a minimum. So great direction to be moving in. And this is another company, Software Automation. Even though their MOQ is definitely higher than 1 because they have to program in all the machines, they are trying to remove humans from the equation. They're trying to remove the very costly part of this production. So they asked how they could replace people sitting at a sewing machine, instead have robots produce clothing. The challenges in this definitely lie in manipulating the fabric, which is really difficult to control and predict. They end up relying on computer vision to try to assemble the products together. They have created some products this way, but it's very difficult and it takes a lot of programming, and like I mentioned, the computer vision. I do not envy the problems that they are trying to solve at all. So here's just this is a quick summary of what is changing and happening right now that we're looking for actually recyclable and biodegradable materials, and they need to come from more renewable sources. We fortunately have new ways to reach and interact with consumers, and we just need to make sure that we're doing it in the right way. And then there are some really exciting possibilities in personalized product and on-demand production that we're getting into as well.